So is it time for climate income? Just want to explain a little bit about who we are, about Citizens Climate Lobby, or CCL for short, to start off with. And I'm going to do that bit. Then I'm going to hand over to Anthony to talk about the more technical bits, about carbon tax, and then carbon tax and dividends. And then Will is going to finish off talking about how you can get involved with Citizens Climate Lobby. So a bit of background. Citizens Climate Lobby, we're a non-profit, non-partisan grassroots advocacy group. And it was started by Marshall Saunders here in the picture in 2007 in the US. Initially, he started working as a campaigner for Results, which was lobbying to tackle hunger issues and world poverty. But he soon realized that world hunger couldn't be solved without first tackling climate change. When he was involved in the lobby group Results, he learned about lots of ways that were helpful in terms of lobbying, political parties, individuals. And he took this really helpful information and then brought it into setting up Citizens Climate Lobby. And one of the key things was that, if you're like me, if you're trying to do something by yourself, just make changes yourself to try and help with climate change. It's really hard just to do it by yourself, and it can seem, you can feel quite hopeless and powerless by yourself. Whereas Marshall, started something to really get people together as a group, to empower them, to organize them, to provide training. And you're much more powerful as a group in terms of bringing about change than by yourself. That was the beginning, just to try and help galvanize, catalyze change to make the world a better place, and doing it as lots of different groups under this organization. So you can see by the map, it started in the US, and just in the 10 years since it started in the US, members are over 92,000 there. There must be more than that now. And they've written tens of thousands of letters to Congress. And in 2021, there are CCL groups in over 40 countries, including here in the UK. And the UK network was set up in 2015. And CCL now have over 590 groups across the world, with more than 210,000 supporters in our volunteer network. And all of us are aligned with the same goals, united to build political will for a livable world. We have a core set of values, what matters to us, what's important. So focus is the first one. That means we're focused on what we see as the single most impactful solution to climate change, which is a national carbon fee and dividend. We know it won't solve the problem entirely, and appreciate the work that our friends in other groups are doing. However, so we can be effective, we don't let ourselves get distracted by work that doesn't support our core purpose. After we accomplish this goal, then we'll tackle the next most impactful solution. And then relationships. We fundamentally believe that people are good and that democracy works. We're confident that our approach will work because we've seen progress. And we stand for a solution, not in protest of other solutions. We don't expect perfection from ourselves or from others, because we're humans and other peoples are humans too. We all don't understand things, don't have a different perspective to start off with, and we make mistakes. And this is a process. We know that people can improve over time. And together we're a community that offers one another comfort, support, and fun. Enjoy spending time together to try and make a difference. And then integrity. We're prepared. We've spent time preparing for this presentation. We hope you will see that. And we do our research. We're always on time for meetings. And we consult experts and use data. We're open to new information. In fact, we seek out opposing opinions, and we refine our solutions to make them better. And we keep going, we keep persevering. And personal power, we use our voices to be heard. For me, before this, I was feeling, pretty helpless as a spectator, but this has allowed me to kind of, make a difference and speak to other people who, have some power to make a difference. And we're volunteer driven, so it's all volunteers doing this. We trust volunteers to make important decisions and to create and develop things that will be valued by citizens' climate lobby. We're cross-party. Our group is open to all who are serious about solving climate change. You're welcome no matter where you live, what you wear, what you do for a living, or who you voted for in the last election. We work with elected officials and community leaders from across the political spectrum because we believe everyone is a political ally. And diversity, whatever your background, ethnicity, gender, age, religion, we welcome everyone to be empowered. We seek out, support, and elevate people who may not have been fully heard. So those are our core values. Now you know what they are and how we got here. We'd like to present to you about our current focus goal, lobbying for a carbon fee and dividend, also called climate income. Firstly, we'll talk about the concept of a traditional carbon tax and then explain the benefits of adding the dividend part. So I'm going to pass over to Anthony, and Anthony's just going to tell me when he wants to change the slides.
Thank you very much, Richard, and hi everyone. So the first thing just to I guess briefly mention is that the idea of putting a price on carbon is not likely to be something that's particularly surprising or unusual for many people. And obviously the concept is actually very simple. If you place a price on carbon emissions and carbon pollution, you then at source, so on fossil fuels, you make them more expensive. You then make it more attractive for people to switch for cleaner alternatives. You encourage companies who are in carbon intensive industries to think about how they can transition and how they can offer cleaner products in order to remain competitive. And we do have a fantastic example of where a very specific carbon tax was extremely effective in the UK. So just 10 years ago, over 40% of our electricity came from coal power stations. And at the time I lived in Didcot, and there was a power station going there. And simply by having a tax based on the CO2 content on our electricity generation capacity, it made coal uncompetitive, and we saw a dramatic shift. Within 6 years, it had fallen from 40% of our electricity to 3%, and now it's around about 1 or less percent. And we often have multiple days now on the trot where we have no coal output, and it will be phased out shortly. So this was very important. Coal is more than twice as carbon intensive as gas, and so this was a specific example where a carbon tax was very, very effective. Next slide, please. So in that vein, there are actually lots of carbon taxes across our economy already. And what this graph shows, and it's not particularly easy to read, and you don't need to look at the detail there specifically, but what it shows is that there's a huge amount of variation in terms of how much tax is applied to different things across different sectors in our economy. So, for instance, at the top end, the highest taxes are for road transport, but if you and electricity use equally, although the carbon taxes associated with electricity use are much higher than gas use in the house, which is much lower. And at the very bottom end, things like aviation and farming actually have negative carbon prices, so they are subsidized, and often means things like either direct subsidies, but also that they are exempt from many regular taxes that other industries are due. So this does create quite an inconsistent approach, and doesn't necessarily provide a joined up sort of application to get us to where we need to get to. And the IPCC estimates that we would need to be moving towards a carbon tax of around about £100 per tonne in the next decade to give ourselves a good chance of staying below 1.5 degrees warming above pre-industrial times. So effectively, pretty much the majority of our sectors at the moment, the fee is too low. So it's good that there are some here, and that's starting to nudge some positive behaviour. But we have to move quite rapidly now in terms of the trajectory of emissions reduction if we are to give ourselves any chance of staying below 1.5 or even 2 degrees warming and no more. Next slide, please. So one of the things that we have to consider when we think about carbon taxes or fees on our fossil fuels is what impact that has, and certainly what impact that has to the most vulnerable in our society. Now, it's not that surprising that the more you earn, the more fossil fuels and carbon you tend to be responsible for, simply just by having more resources that you are spending. You might have more flights, you might have more stuff. But although higher income people will spend more, it's very important to note that people at lower levels of income, it's a much greater proportion of their expenditure. So things like their fuel bills, maybe their petrol, diesel for their car. So we really have to think very, very carefully about ensuring we could come up with a fair solution and a fair system. And you may remember just 3 years ago in France, they looked to put in quite a steep fuel tax to reduce carbon emissions there. But it wasn't thought through properly, and there was a huge backlash with the Gilets jaunes or yellow jacket protests, which led to a reversal of the policy. So it's really important to think about what impact, before you apply something like this, who will be impacted and how will they be impacted, and how can you address that. Now, next slide, please, Richard. So the citizens' climate lobbies have put together a climate income model, and the idea of this is that a steadily rising carbon fee is placed as broadly as possible across our economy, but specifically at source on things like fossil fuels per tonne, and it rises year by year, which gives people sight that it is going to rise, and helps people to think about making sensible decisions about, they know if they continue to do certain things that cost will get higher, and if they can start to steer their activities or their consumption in a different way, then they can avoid that. So the key thing there then, as I say, is it's nudging behavior positively, because you will then see carbon intensive activities getting steadily more expensive. But we do also need to think about the other side of the equation. So if we're adding this tax or fee or this burden on people, how do we address the situation that France had and avoid that issue of popularity? How do we bring our citizens on board to keep everyone happy with the idea? The next slide. And this is where a dividend comes in. So hence the term climate income. So the idea is that the money that's collected from these carbon fees across the economies are actually redistributed to everybody in the UK equally. So the benefit there then is that if you're a lower carbon emitter, and that very closely correlates with people who are often on lower incomes, they will be better off. Whereas if you're a very high emitter, then you're likely to pay out more in the fees than you will receive back from this dividend. But overall, around about 70% of people in the UK would be expected to be better off by this system. So you'd receive more back in dividends from this policy than you would be paying out in the fees at source. So we think it's a really good and a really fair system. There are also a couple of other factors. So there is often some tension in political terms with taxes. Some parties are pro taxation, some wish to try to reduce it and reduce the size of government, and this tries to balance both of those things by ensuring fairness for the individual, whilst also ensuring that rather than the money go into some big hidden pot in the government, we don't quite know what that money will then go towards. It is actually very transparent that it's being shared back with us equally, and again it then encourages us all to do we know how we can reduce our fees whilst retaining the dividend and make that in our own personal interest. And this is supported by the London School of Economics, the Grantham Institute, who feel that this can be a very effective method. However, it is very important to think about those that are fuel poor and make sure that everyone is brought on board, and we think this policy will do just that. Next slide, please. So just to show you a couple of examples, don't know if that will go to the next. Oh. So one of the first countries to try a policy like this was Canada. They actually initiated a trial in one of their provinces in 2008, and starting at a relatively low amount, but they have performed the policy in the way that we've outlined, in a sense that what is collected is then redistributed back equally, and it has pretty broad support. Not only a majority of the Canadian population are now in favour of this policy, but also there's been a change in the political landscape, where the Conservative Party in Canada, who were originally opposed to the idea, they're now not opposed to it anymore. They do have a different view of it. They would reduce the amount and they would implement it in a slightly different way, but broadly they're on board now, and they see that this is an important tool that is required to help Canada to reduce its carbon emissions. The next one, please. And the next country is Switzerland. And again, around about a similar time, they began to implement this scheme back in 2008. And it covers around about, I think it's about 30–40% of their economy at the moment. And that's because it's not always very simple to include all sectors, and these are often built up over time to incorporate more and more sectors as you go. And the way that they've applied it in Switzerland is 70% of the revenue that's come back from this is redistributed, and they redistribute it to people through their energy consumption, their energy bills. and 30% is held back to support energy efficiency and renewable energy programs. And again, some people think that's quite a good idea, or potentially to keep back a smaller pot that could also help those in fuel poverty. So that's Switzerland. So who supports the idea of climate income? Well, there was a huge show of support. If you go to historyismade.org, there was a letter signed by 3,500 economists. One of those notable economists is our former governor of the Bank of England, Mark Carney. And he said it's very important to have a uniform carbon price. The solution is to rebate individuals. So he could certainly see that that was a really key part, that we shouldn't just do the first part. We really needed to make sure we share this benefit to bring people on board. And just briefly, there are many examples in this book. If this is something you're really interested to learn a bit more about, it's called The Case for Carbon Dividends by James Boyce. And it's a very interesting read about lots of different stories around the world and examples, and how this has gained a lot of cross sort of sector, cross profession support. So the next one. So again, many environmentalists support this. This is a good example is Jonathan Parratt, who's a very notable environmental campaigner and writer. And again, he feels that it's very key that we distribute a dividend to citizens in order to ensure that this is a just transition. So next. One of my favourites, I went to see him many years ago talk at the London School of Economics. The veteran climate scientist, Dr. James Hansen, is very, very strongly in favour of this. And he sees it as the most effective method, fee and dividend, to drive down fossil fuel use. And he's been very proactive in this, including writing to our own government very recently. You can read his open letter to really push them to implement this policy as soon as possible. Next. And in terms of the support across the political divide, again, the Policy Exchange, who are a right-leading but very prominent think tank in the UK and influential in policy creation, recently produced a report called The Future of Carbon Pricing. And the introduction was written by both Lord or William Hague from the Conservative Party and Alistair Darling from the Labour Party. And they said it's important we take people with us. If carbon taxes are seen to unduly punish the average citizen, they will fail. This is why Policy Exchange's idea of recycling the revenue from the taxation back to the people in the form of a carbon dividend is worth exploring, and it would make a carbon tax both progressive and popular. So it really has now taken hold, and we're seeing the same in the United States. There are people involved in the Reagan-Bush administration, involved in an organization called the Climate Leadership Program, I believe, and they very strongly are lobbying for carbon fee and dividend there as well. Next slide, please. And just a nice success story for the Citizens Climate Lobby. As Richard showed at the start, there are many groups distributed around the world, and also a few groups in the UK. And the Devices group approached their Conservative MP, who was unaware of the idea, and he is now on board and is now pushing and for this from the inside. And it does show the importance. Obviously, politicians are extremely busy. They've got so many topics that they need to keep on top of. And we've recently approached Matt Rodder in Reading about this, and he was aware of carbon taxes. He hadn't heard of the idea of redistributing it back to the public, and he's very interested to continue some dialogue with us to see how that could fit for the Labour Party. Okay, next slide. And finally, from the government, so whilst we've got broad support from economists, from academics, from environmentalists, and also from many politicians, at the moment, the government, whilst certainly favouring carbon taxing and gradually implementing that and replacing our we used to be part of the EU emissions trading scheme and setting up something that's equivalent for the UK, but they are not yet sold on the idea of a full redistribution dividend policy. And so that's why it's so important that anyone who is interested and thinks this is a great idea, and we would really welcome your assistance to help us push this forward. I think I'll hand over to Will, who's going to talk about what we can do next. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anthony. Can everyone hear me quickly?
Yes.
Awesome. So hopefully now you're aware of what the idea of climate income entails and are warming towards the policy that we're very passionate about. I'd like to talk to you about the fun part, which is how you can get involved. The most powerful thing that you can do to spread awareness and push the policy of climate income is emailing your local MP about it. I know it seems like a daunting idea, or maybe some of you have talked to your local MP before, and if you've done that, you'll know that it's actually a quick and easy experience, and generally they're quite welcoming and happy to talk to you about a policy that you're interested in, or an issue that you want to talk about. We can provide guides and support for those of you who haven't done this before. However, it has been seen that an email that's tailored and written by a concerned constituent is far more impactful than what many that come from a template. It holds an MP's attention a lot more, and you're far more likely to get a proper written response, which will lead to a call. Secondly, you can sign up to the CCL UK mailing list if you'd like to stay in touch and see the progress we're making. You can, of course, do this if you're not quite ready to contact your local MP, as this will have plenty of useful and inspiring information. CCL also have a monthly ask for all members and interested parties, and we'd be delighted for you to take part. This will be along the lines of sort of a certain thing that we ask everyone to do to spread awareness, or it might be emailing your local MP or something like that. It's completely optional, and we understand that everyone has commitments and their lives. So if you don't have time, we completely understand. Thirdly, if you would like to sign up to the CCL, you can attend our national monthly meetings where everyone from all chapters around the country meet up to discuss plans, share interesting information, and watch presentations from scientists, policymakers, and other very smart people who are helping towards our cause, and who can give advice on how to lobby effectively, even if you have zero experience. If you're still on the fence, you can always attend a welcome meeting where you can find out more about joining CCL and how you can help. No commitments, no pressure. Next slide, please. You may be thinking, what has this all got to do with Reading? As it all seems like a very national or global policy. But Reading is actually vitally important in the next few months. The MP for Reading West, Alok Sharma, is chairing COP26, the climate summit in Glasgow in November, where countries from around the world meet up to discuss climate policy and plans to tackle climate change. Being Reading constituents, whether you have Matt Rodder or Alok Sharma, or if you're from Henley or anywhere around, we really appreciate that we have the best opportunity out of any CCL group or any constituency to get Alok Sharma to hear about this policy. So even if you don't sign up to CCL or join us in the Reading group, the most powerful thing you can do right now is send a letter to your MP, whether that's Mr. Sharma, whether it's not, you can ask your MP to forward it to Mr. Sharma, which they are constitutionally obliged to do. And that will really help us get the word out and try to influence him and maybe have an effect on what happens at COP. If you still feel like you don't know what you would write, then feel free to email us for advice and support. I think Jack put the email for the CCL in the chat. And then you can ask any questions you like, and we can help you as much as we can. Collective action is a very powerful force. Therefore, a central part of the CCL is our meetings. I've already told you about the monthly CCL welcome meeting, but feel free to come along to the CCL Reading's fortnightly meetings, even if you don't have time for the former as well. We meet to learn from each other, celebrate each other's successes as well as those of the group as a whole, practice and develop skills that lobbying involves, and decide practical actions for the next week. Don't worry too much about these actions. Again, everyone has their own lives. We just want whatever time you have and however much you can give us. Next slide, please. The most important thing to remember about our group is that we want anyone and everyone who cares about the planet. Your views, time, and passion are helpful to us, whoever you are. Don't feel like you need to know much about us, climate income, or politics to have an impact. We're just a group of constituents trying to do our bit using our constitutional rights. Next slide. Thank you so much for listening. We'd appreciate any feedback you have, and we're here to answer any questions you may have.
Good work, everyone.
We're still here.
Has anyone got any questions or any comments? Feel free to put them in the chat or unmute yourself and ask them. Yeah, thanks very much, George, for your feedback. Oh, great, George. You said you've already sent a letter to Alok. Fantastic. Myself being Reading West constituents, I've done that, and quite a few people I know have done that now. It's probably had about eight to 10 letters about climate income. Yeah, so thank you. And all those letters count because they have to create a tally of how many letters they get and what it's about. So the more letters people receive, that shows in the tally. And that's a powerful thing to do.
Yeah.
And by doing that, we have had a written response from Alok Sharma, but that letter is focusing just on carbon pricing. So the response was that the government has always taken carbon pricing as being important, and it sees it as being an important tool going forwards. But it sounds at the moment that they are just focusing on that first bit, the carbon tax or the carbon fee. They're not considering the dividend bit, which is crucial, as we've explained, in order to get people on board with it, to build will to it. So we could really, do with help from people just to keep pushing that point forwards. Yeah, thanks, Debbie, for your feedback. Very interesting.
RMP, I've only ever been in one constituency. You phone up the constituency office and say, when's John having a surgery in our part of the constituency? And his secretary says, yes, Friday afternoon in a month or two's time, and say, okay, can I book a slot? And you gather a few people together, he likes about 3 people maybe, and we go along and have a chat. That was sort of pre-COVID. Now it's by Zoom, but it's still roughly the same system, and it's very easy to get an audience. So I've talked to him about the CCR policies many times.
Oh, good.
And Ed is our newest member, by the way. Welcome, Ed.
Cheers.
Nice to see you join us.
Yeah.
I've been involved actually with CCL UK as well.
Oh, have you? Oh,
Yeah.
that's useful.
So I've been meaning to sort of reach out to you for a while, but been a bit lapsed on that one.
Yeah, fantastic.
And I think Will mentioned that we welcome people sort of however much and however little time you've got, it might well be, for instance, that people can help for a few weeks or a few months, and then they go through a busy period and they need to sort of back off for a bit, and that's fine. And we all, I think most of the group are probably having to balance it with other things, but between us, I think we seem to move forward and progress. We're after a real variety of skills and experience. I'll give you a few examples. Some of it is around research, so people are interested in reading. There's lots of documents coming out by people like Policy Exchange and government, and so some people are interested in research and reading a bit and then feeding back to the group about some of the key things that are coming out. If you're interested in the numbers side, then there's a CCL recently created a tool with some figures for how the carbon tax might work, how much it might be, and how it might play out. And so again, that if someone was interested to look at the numbers side of it, that sort of thing's possible. Obviously, there's lobbying MPs directly, also community engagement. So what we want to do is, we think this is a great and simple policy idea that's fair, and we basically just want to try to get the message out to more and more people in the constituency so that they are encouraged to contact their MP. So anyone who's interested in community engagement, it might be some of you already involved in other community groups, and because we'll be looking to try to set up some similar talks to this, trying to reach out and connect as broadly as we can. And then again, someone that might be good at writing letters, leaflets more creatively, or producing PowerPoints, maybe can help to improve that, or could be social media. So there are so many different aspects, and and we welcome everybody. I wonder, is it possible to pop into chat the link for yes, the UK website? So that's where they you can sign up to the CCR UK newsletter. Is that right? Perfect, lovely.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just getting the link for the newsletter sign up now.
That's lovely. And okay. Is it worth popping the email address for the CCR Reading group?
Yeah, sure.
To hand, sorry. And so yeah, if anyone has any reflections, maybe once you've had a bit of a think about it, feel free to contact us. And so we haven't done many presentations. In fact, this is our first, so we really welcome any feedback. If you think we could improve it, we would be really grateful for any comments.
What really excites me about the policy is we all know that taxes work, say like in reducing smoking, or even the way the coal was driven out of the UK electricity generation industry. So taxes work, but we know that to get a tax that will drive carbon out of the economy has to be really, really high. And so politicians just don't even think it's a possibility. But if there's the dividend with it, the climate income, then suddenly you can have a really high level of tax and still keep people on board and make sure that the poorest aren't punished by it. So that's why I'm so excited. It's you can achieve this through the correct way, which is through tax, and keep people on board and keep society healthy.
Mm. Yeah, thanks, Ed. Yeah.
No, yeah, it is really good, because tax is also one of those sort of buzzwords that politicians and a lot of people kind of hate and switch off after hearing. But with the dividend and, well, kind of changing it to calling it climate income like we have, it kind of really transforms the policy into something that will help everyone, rather than just another tax people hear about.
Yeah, they did cap and trade in, well, all over the place, but the European trading system, to avoid having to make it a tax, and it's a bit pathetic, really, how it's turned out.
Mm.
Yeah, you're right. It's well, many of them have been applied at quite a low and cautious level, which is, as I say, it's starting to nudge different industries depending on how strong it's been. But yeah, if you listen to climate science, we know we need to really accelerate now and pick up the pace. And so this is the kind of simple policy that hopefully will really help across all sectors. And yeah, and as I say, it doesn't start very high immediately, but it should have it should rise steadily, and then everyone has a really clear view of the direction of travel, and can figure out their models for how to transition.
Yeah. Yeah, as soon as the price in 2025 or something is announced, then everyone immediately starts work on innovation and technology development to achieve their products and services at a lower carbon level. So you get the benefit of the tax years before it actually is implemented.
Yeah.
Great. Any more questions? I see George has put a comment in the chat. Current momentum on hydrogen power may help in some shape or form.
Yeah, I think it's going to, it will just encourage lots of focus on many alternative technologies. And we know things like electric cars is now reasonably bedded in and is happening and is proven. And hydrogen certainly is going to have some applications that will only be encouraged, and the R&D will improve and the efficiency will improve as there's more incentive to shift away from fossil fuels applied. So
do we want to mention about the carbon border adjustment?
Oh, did we jump past that slide? That's a really good point.
Yeah, we may well have done. The slides were a bit kind of sticky and kind of, yeah. Oh
no, okay, yeah, sorry, that's a really good point. So one thing that often gets mentioned, if we were to implement this policy in the UK, is people say, well, if you make our more carbon intensive industries more expensive, it will make us uncompetitive, which means that ultimately we could put people out of work in this country and actually import higher carbon intensive products from abroad. And we have seen this in other ways, things like the steel industry and things like that. So the way to tackle this, and the Citizens Climate Lobby's policy here, is that you'd have a border adjustment. So if you import, if something's imported into the UK and they don't have a carbon tax in their country, then the tax is applied at the border, which means the imports do not get a preferential advantage. And likewise, to stop our companies becoming uncompetitive abroad, if they export from the UK, they actually get rebated that tax back to an equivalent level to make them competitive with the market they're selling to. But one good thing about applying this to imports is, I don't know, let's say we're importing lots of goods from Australia and we're applying a carbon tax, that their government will soon figure out that it's actually in their interest to apply the tax in their own country, and then they retain the money rather than simply hand that money over to the UK. So by doing it, you're encouraging other countries to actually follow suit. And again, we're seeing different levels of carbon taxes and different flavors emerging globally. It isn't just the UK or Europe. These are starting to emerge all over, but this really helps encourage and push those countries to hopefully accelerate as well, and hopefully in time, you know, most of the high intensive economies will converge at a sensible rate that will assist the transition.
Right. Any last questions or comments?
Is anyone skeptical about it as an idea? I think that perhaps it won't fly.
Great.
Okay.
Brilliant. Okay, well, yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Yeah, we're really glad you did. Yeah, and we really hope you will be, enthused to find out more, maybe to join CCR UK, or the Reading group if you are around Reading, or even start your own group somewhere else in the UK, or join an existing group somewhere else in the UK. And I know there are 2 people from Bristol here as well, so not just the Reading area. So please get involved, and let's all collaborate to make the world better for our future generations. This policy really has the power to do that. We just need to get the political will in place to do it. So thank you so much, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Thank
Bye-bye.
Thank you.